Alrighty, welcome back. So as I said before, we can see in our JavaScript that we have a lot of repetitive code happening here. Within modern development, we want to use other functions if necessary to limit the amount of repetition. So you can see we have a lot of repetition here, and even in our event listener. As I said in the last video, we're 53 lines here. I believe we can actually get it to 40 in total. So let's see how we can do that. The first thing we're going to attempt to do is, instead of having a separate line to remove and add a class, we're going to do this within one line only. To accomplish this, we can add in a replace method instead of add or remove. And this will take two parameters. The first is the thing that we want to remove, and the second is the one that we want to add. So in this case, we want to remove overlay slide left, and we want to add overlay slide right. Okay, so we can get rid of these, and we can copy this. And we're going to put this same thing in our animate out. Of course, in this case, we're going to have the opposite. So we want to remove slide right, and we want to add slide left. Okay, so let's save that and check it out. We can see that, okay, nothing is working. So let's go into our dev tools here. And if we look at the elements, let's have a look at our overlay specifically. We can see that we have the overlay active happening, but we don't have a slide left or a slide right happening. That's not ideal. The reason that this is happening is because we can't replace a class with another class if that first class isn't there. So we'll need to actually work around this by adding the slide left class to our overlay by default. So we're going to add overlay dash slide left. So this is okay because it is off the page with our slide left, so it shouldn't impact our page at all. So you can see we already have our overlay slide left. If I refresh the page, you can see it's still there. And now if we press it, we can see that it replaced with right and our animation is working again. Okay, that's good. Now we know that we want to do a similar thing with these. We want to have a replace instead. So that means that we're going to need to have whichever one is the off value be added to the class list of our nav item within our HTML. So let's do that now. So similar to what we just did here, for each of these list items, we're going to add the class of slide dash out dash 1 in this case, because that's our first nav item. And we're going to copy and paste this. And we're going to change the numbers. And we can save that. Again, because the slide out class is transforming off the page, we're not going to see it when we load the page for the first time. So now in our JavaScript, we're going to need to do something about these lines. So instead of just cutting these lines in half by replacing these 10 lines with 5 lines that have replace, I think we can actually do even better than that. So I'm going to start by, at the top, actually creating an array of nav items. So nav items equals, and then to create an array, we're going to use our square brackets. And I'm going to pass in each of our nav constants. So nav1, nav2, nav3, nav4, nav5. And you'll see why in just a moment. So in our nav toggle function, we're actually going to be able to remove all of this, believe it or not. And we're going to replace it with just one line each. So we're going to be calling its own function, nav animation, and we're going to be passing in two different parameters. We're going to be passing in the direction that we want to remove and the direction that we want to add. So similar to our replace, first one is being removed, second one is being added. So when we're animating in, we're removing out and adding in, and we're going to copy that and paste it here, and we're going to do the opposite. We want to remove in and add out, and then we're going to need to create a function above this. So we'll comment out a title for this, control navigation animation, function nav animation, and it's going to take 2 parameters. We're going to create the variables for each of those right now. So it's going to be direction 1 and direction 2. You can name these whatever you want because they'll just be used within this function. And the next thing we're going to do is, because we've created an array with our nav items, we can use an array method. So we're going to call our nav items array, and we're going to use a for each method. So this for each method allows us to run a function on each item within the array. So we're going to have the method there, and then within this, we're going to pass in a local variable. In this case, we'll name it nav. And we're also going to pass in the index so that we can add the number back to our CSS class, because remember, it's slide in 1 or slide out 1. So we're going to need to add a number for that as well. And we're going to use an arrow function here, curly brackets, press enter. Within this, we're going to now use the nav variable that we've just created. We're going to use classless like we did before. We're going to use replace. And then for the 2 parameters in here, we're actually going to do something a little bit different, and we're going to use a template string. So you're going to use the backticks button. This is right below your escape button. You see it looks kind of like single quotes, but they're on their side there. And the reason we're using this, we're going to write in the class name slide dash, is because it allows us to pass in the variable. So we're going to pass in our direction 1, direction 2. To do that, we're going to use $, and then curly brackets, and you can see there that it changed color to blue. That means it's now ready to accept variables. And we're going to pass in our direction 1. And then after that, we're going to have a dash, within the backtick, of course, because this is creating a string when it is processed. And we're going to create another variable here, and we're going to pass in the I, which is the index. That's the number that we want to get. Then comma, and we'll repeat the same process, slide dash, and then we're going to pass in our direction 2, and then another dash, and then we're going to pass in our I number again. Okay, so we can save that and try it out, see what happens. Okay, so if we try it out, we can see that our overlay is working, but now our navigation items are not working. So I would challenge you again here to pause the video and see if you can figure it out. It has to do with how array indexing works. That's your hint. All right, so welcome back. Let's see how we can figure it out. So we're going to go back into our code, and we're actually going to console log our template string. So we'll just copy this whole thing and see what's actually happening when we are evaluating our template string. So let's save that, open up the console, and when we press on our hamburger icon, we can see, I hope obviously we can see the problem. So you can see that our template string is working in that it's passing in our out and in correctly, but the numbers are wrong. You remember that our classes are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is because an index by nature is 0 indexed, meaning that it starts counting from the number 0 instead of counting from the number 1. So this is a very easy fix. We can actually jump back into our template string, and we can actually do I plus 1. You see it's green because it's an actual number. And we can do the same thing here, I plus 1. So let's save that and check it out. Okay, awesome. Our navigation is working again. That's great. Okay, let's jump back to our JavaScript. So we've managed to trim up this very, very well. This is much more efficient than the 20 lines of code that we had before. The last thing that we can trim up is our event listeners, and we can do this in a similar way to what we just did. So we're going to remove all of these. All of them are the same, luckily, in this case. We're passing in the same parameters for all of them, but we're doing it for each of these nav items. But because we made a nav items array, we can use that again, and we can use our same for each. And we're going to pass in, this time, just our nav parameter, create our arrow function here, and then inside of this, we're going to do nav, add event listener, and we're going to just add back our event listener. So again, the great thing about this is all the parameters are the same, so that makes it a lot easier than what we did just now. So let's save that and make sure that it still works. That's the important thing. Okay, moment of truth. All right, so our navigation is working, and if we actually click on one of them, we're going into the section and our navigation is disappearing. All right, awesome. So that's all of our functionality working, and you can see that we have much more efficient code here than we did before. We trimmed out about 14 lines of code. Awesome. So that's it for the project. I hope that you learned a lot about dry code as well as animating a navigation. Feel free to modify this project as much as you like and use this style of navigation in your project if you would like to. All right, I'll see you in the next project. Bye for now.